Hello and welcome back to SpecBuilder video tutorials. Today we're going to talk about analyzing the data. We will cover different aspects related to data analyzing and we'll cover the major business use case. So let's begin with an example. Our partners from Great Supplies Inc. sent us the typical purchase order document which they process and which they are going to send us. This document is pretty straightforward 850 transaction. You can see that X12 document here. It has multiple line items. It has the sender ID, receiver ID, the supplier information, the address, and all that. So this is pretty simple document, and they are planning to keep sending us this document during the duration of our engagement. And our goal is to make sure that this sample document is all good. All the information in that document is correct, or if there are any discrepancies, then we either need to fix the document, maybe there is just a misprint, or we may need to send back the report saying these are the errors in your document. So let's start with analyzing this file. To do that, we will need to click this Analyzer button in SpecBuilder UI, and there is another entry point to the same functionality. I'll talk about that. That entry point comes from the guideline. So let's click on that. Let's pick the data file, and we'll just choose the same data file from here. This is the purchase order. This is the EDI file. You could also validate different file types, analyze positional files, XML, and so on. But we'll go ahead with the EDI. As you can see, the system already understood that this is 850 transaction, and it suggests us the proper schema for that data. So we'll click next. It will create a guideline, create the specification for the data, and it will do the analysis. We got the dialog that the analysis has finished. So what we can see here, and by the way, we are at the data errors tab. Whenever there are errors in the data, it will automatically jump to this page. So let's take a quick look at what we see on the screen. On the left side, we still have the schema of the document, which we covered on the previous videos. On the right side, you would see the data structure. This is pretty much the structure as we saw before. Here, all the segments, all the elements, but it is broken down into the hierarchy. So we have the interchange, the group, transaction. We still see ISA, JS segments and all that, but we also see the logical grouping, the loops, the segments. We can expand each segment and see the details. For example, if we take the BAG segment, clicking on every field will automatically do the cross match between the data and the guideline. And if we click on something, we can go back to properties, we can check what are the rules for this specific element, and we can go back and see if there are any errors in that. Now let's take a look at the errors. We have several errors. One error says that PO101 assigned identification has some incorrect characters, and if we look at the data, we see there is this BAT, which looks like the Norwegian word for ship or for the boat. So apparently the metal bars which they ship to us have this name, and this character in the middle is not allowed according to X12. There is another error. It says that the date is not valid, so we have 2014 and the month is 23, which is obviously incorrect. There are some other errors about these metal bars, and it seems like there is a misprint in the monetary amount. There is the I at the end, which is obviously not correct numeric value. So what we can do with that, we can print a report, and a simple report. This is an error report which shows all the errors which happened in this data. It indicates what data field caused that error and it gives the information about the error location, severity, and so on. So we can take that, print, and send back to our trading partners so they can revisit the data and fix it. Some errors we can fix ourselves just to pass through this step. So we can either click F2, which is a hotkey for editing, or we can click Edit and fix the data. Once we fix this data, let's go ahead and fix this one. This is the date. We can fix that and put, for example, 12 in here. What we can do now is, first we can print the data. This is just a print out of all segments in this data. You may use that to convey this information to your partner to send data which was sent. What we can also do, this is the second button in the toolbar, it is called Analyzer. We can launch the Analyzer from here. This is the second way of executing the Analyzer, which I mentioned at the very beginning. So you can start from here, or you can create a guideline or use the existing guideline and then assign the data file to that guideline to analyze. So we'll click on Reanalyze. It will verify that same data file, taking into consideration our changes that we've just made. So let's click on that. We'll see the progress, and don't show that again. As we can see, the previous errors about the data and about the date and the amount are now gone, and we only have these errors about the metal bars. Now, a couple words about editing the data and analyzing the data. As you can see, this structure is pretty technical. Whoever works with this data must clearly understand what is the segment, what is the delimiter, what does this tilde mean, what role it plays, what other qualifiers. So for example, there is unit of measure, it is 0,1, so somebody needs to know what is 0,1 and so on. If the user which is working with the data is not that technical, there is a feature called Business Data View. It is available by this button in the toolbar. So by clicking on that, we immediately transform the presentation of the data into the form-based, user-friendly UI. So on the left side, we have all the same fields in the purchase order line item. As you can see, this field is in error, and if we hover the mouse, it will give us the error, and we also see that there is this status bar saying that there is one error. Now, if you look at this unit of measure, then now you don't have to remember that 0,1 means actual pounds. You can just use the drop down and pick whatever needed. And of course, you can navigate back and forth. You can step up to the loop level, see all the segments in that loop, all the information. There is a date picker, so you can pick the date. If the date is incorrect, you can just go ahead and pick that from that calendar. You can go to the transaction level. You see multiple line items. You can click on any, and you'll dive deep into the details of this transaction. You can also do editing, like you can remove, you can duplicate, or you can drill down into more details about this specific segment. So this is very powerful editor for business users, for those who want to work with the data in a form type, not in the structural way. But of course, structural way is also always available to you, so you can leverage that and use it. The next thing that we're gonna do is we can print the report. This is the summary report, or it is also called splitting report. It gives more technical deep dive into the data file. So it shows how many inner changes, what is the status. Partial means some nested sections are in error, and we can see the actual errors. So there's business line item which is rejected, and this is the cause of the rejection. Some of them were accepted, there is another one rejected. So you can go ahead and print that. Again, it is more technical, so if your counterpart in Great Supplies Inc. is a technical person, they might be interested in all those details. That is printable. Behind the scenes, we have an XML file. This is an XML file with pretty much the same information. We can navigate to the error, so this is the error message. So that file is also available to you should you need, but this is more important for the machine processing whenever you need to transform or do anything else. There is another form of reporting. That report pretty much prints out the data in more human readable form. It shows the envelope information, what was the interchange, sender ID, receiver ID, group, and it goes down through all the segments and all elements, and it displays that in this nice user-friendly UI. You can again print that out and send to somebody or just save it on disk. So let's go back to our data. We still have some errors to fix. Those errors probably we will not be able to fix those in data, because this is the clear name of the metal bar and hardly we can do anything about that. What we can do is, in order for this file to pass the validation, pretty much what we need to do is we need to say this is not an error, even though it conflicts with X12, we should still accept that data. In order to do that, there is a special mechanism called Error Severity, where you can assign the severity for any error in the data file. If you just right-click on the error, there are two possibilities. Either use severity by error ID, which means whenever there is an error with this ID, it will be assigned one of these severities. Critical means stop processing any further errors and just terminate, because there is something really weird with the data, we don't need to proceed. Normal, just an error. Warning means the data is not rejected, but there is something you need to take a look at. Information, usually it's just some statistics or anything which is not really an error. And ignore. Ignore means just do not display this error to us, we are not interested. So second option is you can use error ID and UPath. UPath is an Edifecs term which designates the location of the field in the structure, in the schema. So if we click here and then click select, you would see there is this technical path which says transaction 850, loop PO1, segment PO1, and element 350. So this error severity would use not only the error ID, but also the location of an error, because the same error, for example, this error about incorrect characters, may appear in some other place. For example, in the address or in the name of the supplier, and we don't want to suppress those errors because those are significant. We only want to suppress these errors in on this exact element. So what we will do is we'll just click here, and for now we'll select warning. We are redirected to the special UI. Now we're editing the severity document. You can see severity 2 at the top, and it's pretty straightforward. There is an error ID, snip type, and the severity we want to assign to that UPath, to that error ID and UPath. So for now it is warning. We will go ahead and save this. Severity 2, we can give it Great Supplies Severity, just in case we need to reuse that in the future. Now if you go back to the data, take a look at this part of the ribbon. It says Error Severity. Here you can either choose to use your new severity file which you created, or you can use default or system one. And you may assign this severity to be default, meaning it will be used whenever you verify the data. So if you work with the data from your trading partner pretty frequently, you may choose that option, so you don't assign the severity for every data file manually. It will be done automatically. So let's revalidate the data. And now, if we look at the severity, now it says warning, which means the data file no longer has rejecting errors. It has just a warnings. But what if we don't really need to see those errors in the report? We don't need them. We know that such thing can happen, so let's just ignore that. All right, we can do that. We need to go back to the severity configuration, and instead of warning, we'll just select ignore. So let's save that, go back, and reanalyze. And by the way, it is still points to that severity file. We will reanalyze, and all our errors are gone. Even though the error itself is present, we are just suppressing that error by using the error severity. There are some more advanced features to error severity. There are some compound criteria when you want to use not only the UPath, but certain, for example, certain fields from the error, like the error date or something else. So you can make these configuration pretty advanced. In this example, we just use the most simple one. So now our data file is pretty good. We fixed some errors manually. Some errors we have suppressed. We use the business view in order to work with the data, so we don't need to remember all the codes, qualifiers, all the code lists, so it's all present in here. Now there are some technical options. I'll just spend 1 minute talking about them. There are two options in here. One is edit delimiters, meaning you can change the delimiters throughout the file. This table shows the current delimiters, but we can change that to something else. And there are some options, the runtime options, which are used during the analyzer. It tells whether you want to run with advanced options, whether you want to generate the LDNS report. LDNS report is that report which we generated, the splitting report, which shows the structure, the errors, all the line items, and so forth. So you may choose to generate that or not generating that. Xdata is an Edifecs XML format of the EDI data, XML representation. Based on Xdata, we generated this data report. And also there is an XML version of that, which you can leverage. So in these options, you pretty much said that. There are some other advanced options, like how to process a large data file and so on. So by having that, we can accomplish the problem of analyzing the file, generating the report with errors to send back to our trading partner, fix the errors, and suppress some errors should we need to do so. Now there is another question. Given we have this specification, how would we generate some sample data? Let's say we build the specification, but we have not yet received the data from our trading partner, but we want to test it to see how it works, if there are any discrepancies, or let's say we want to test on 10 STSE transactions within the data file. So what we can do is we can use the special tool, which is designed exactly for that. It is called data generator. As it goes from the name, it can generate the data and it can analyze the data. So what we can do now is we can generate the new test case. We can there are two options. You can either generate new or you can update the existing using special rules, and we'll talk about those rules in a bit. We'll click generate. Now we need to choose the data, or the structure, which will be used as a guideline for this generation. Let's pick 5010 and add 50 data, purchase order. We'll click next. Now whether we want to use envelopes from the database or from the file, we'll just use default. It shows that this is 5010 envelope. We'll click next. Now we can choose how big we want this data to be and whether we want to keep only mandatory data or we can have some percentage of the optional data. We'll just click next. Data size, if the field, for example, is from 1 to 10 in terms of length, it can either pick the random length for the field or maximum, minimum size, so you can drive those options. You can click next. Here we specify delimiters, and now we get this file. As you can see, this is a dummy, pretty much dummy file. It has some fields, segments, and so on. And all this is for the dates. We pick the current date, so there is some logic behind that. It tries to generate as good file as possible. It picks some string values from the field names and so on. But at least this gives you ability to take the file, to take the specification and generate a sample file out of it. And the sample file will be very close to the valid EDI file. All the lengths, all the positions, everything is preserved, so this should be very well-formed X12 file. Now let's get back to our example. I'll switch to Data Explorer. We'll talk about it in details in a bit later. So what we can do here is, here we see the data file which has some information which can be considered to be proprietary. For example, if we send this data to some vendor so they can do some testing, let's say some software gives an error which is not expected, we would not like that vendor to really know who we are making business with. What is the name of the company, what is the address, so all that. But still we want to preserve the data file itself so they can see the line items, the numbers, and so on. So what we really need to do is we need to de-identify the data. This process is called de-identification. So we want to replace or mask all the valuable information with some dummy values. To do that, we have the tool called de-identification, and there are some de-identification rules. I clicked on this rules editor. Here we can define some patterns. They are called match patterns. So we say that find the segment ISA and replace the field number 6 or whatever it is with, instead of having the actual sender ID grade supplies, we'll have the test sender and test receiver. And we will mask sender ID, we'll mask supplier name, supplier address, and all that. You can add more rules to that. I'm just using pre-built set. So this was the rules editor. Now if we click on data identification, first we will need to choose the rule file. We have the rule file for 850. We'll click next. And what happened now is data has been transformed. As you can see, there is no longer grade suppliers. There is test sender, test receiver, the address has changed, and this report at the bottom would show you all the replacement which happened to the data. So we placed Seattle, demo supplier, this is the original data, this is what we've placed into the data, and it puts the description of why this rule was applied. Now, this data is safe to be sent to somebody because it doesn't contain any sensitive information. Let's go ahead and save this file, and let's call it de-identified. All right, now what if we would like to compare the, let's pick de-identified data and the original data, just to see what are the differences in the data. Or this could be the data before we applied the fixes to the data file and after. To compare the data, we have the tool called Data Comparator. I'm gonna click that. It allows you to do the side-by-side comparison. So I'll pick the original data, and on the right side it will be de-identified data. We'll click next. It will suggest us that this is 850 transaction, which is true. Same about the target data file, the right side. And what we see now is very similar to what we've seen in Migrator. It shows the left side, the right side, and all the differences. We can print out the report, which will show us all the changes. As we remember, we replaced the sender ID, receiver ID, we replaced the name and the address. That report can be printed and stored for later use. You can also expand and see the details of all the changes. So it's the demo supplier versus suppliers international, and there are some changes in data. So that tool really helps you comparing the data files, but with respect to the knowledge of the EDI specifics. So it builds the loops, it builds transactions. It's not like the plain text comparison tool. It gives much more intelligence over what data you compare and what the changes might mean. So that concludes our session about analyzing the data, comparing the data. We've learned how to verify that the data is correct, or how to compare the data files, and how can we mask certain sensitive information from the data. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon in the next video. Bye.